prayer and pledge, please.
Lord, assist with thy Holy Spirit of counsel all those who are serving in positions of authority and responsibility. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, let's take the roll call, please.
Ms. Howell, here. Mr. Matthew, here. Mr. Velez.
Here. Councilors, item number 3 on the agenda for May 11, 2015, discussion by council vote or other action on emergency road repairs to Meadowbrook Avenue. Mr. Pendergrass, the Director of Public Works, was here earlier to do this. Mr. Igliozzi, we had a little conversation with Mr. Pendergrass about the legality. It's an emergency, and I believe he's going to move forward with this, or does it have to come back to the town council?
It doesn't have to come to the council. It has to be approved by both the council president and the town administrator. And I indicated Mr. Pendergast should reduce in writing the basis of the emergency, which I know you verified. But
Yeah, for the record, I took a ride over there later this afternoon and saw it, so I would concur that it's an emergency and it will strain some residents down there, so. Okay, so that is going to be taken care of. Number 4 on the public, does anyone want that discussion, anybody have a question about it?
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
I just had a question. My concern is to put this on the election for July. I was wanting to maybe propose that we hold off for a general election just because the lack of voters that will be out in July. I was just thinking that this is a big deal and we might want to have it at a general election when we have more voters and it not pass on a small vote or fail on a small vote. And I was just wanting to bring that up.
Councilor Ralph, you're referring to item 4, public hearing workshop, already proposed charter amendments, a discussion by council vote or other action, correct?
Correct.
I share your thoughts. It's going to be very difficult to get voters out in July as it is. So, what would you suggest?
I would like to make a motion, I'm not sure if I can, if it would fall under this, but the charter amendment for the town manager, I'd like to table that or table the workshop and not rush into this and maybe have it ready for the next general election.
Okay, so it would not fall within the election to replace what we're trying to accomplish, finding an elected town council member, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just think because there's going to be such low numbers, I'm just afraid that people aren't going to realize it's on there and we're going to have such low attendance that it's going to look like we're trying to push something out there and not make everybody aware of it. I would just rather wait till we have a larger majority of people voting.
Councilor Nato, your thoughts?
Councilor Alves for all items, other than replacing Councilor Alves.
My biggest one was just the town manager portion of it.
The only issue that I have with that is if we have on the ballot 2 positions for town manager, and then we're asking to change the charter to a town manager, that might be confusing. It will be confusing. That's the only issue that I have with that.
Then I guess we would hold out the whole thing. I just think if we're going to have such few voters out there that it's going to pass or fail on such low numbers that it might not be fair to the community. That's my own thought, and I'm just thinking that we're just going to have backlash after the fact saying that it was kind of sitting there and we didn't give it enough time.
Well, this, if I may, this has come before. Why, I've been sitting as a council member. This is the 3rd time this has come. Twice it was rejected by the voters of North Smithfield. I'm not averse to giving them a say in it, but I agree with what you're saying, Councilor Alves. I mean, I'll move forward with this, but I think it's probably best for in the fall when it's not during the July vacation period. I don't think enough people are going to be available to vote for this to get a true sense of what the voters want. But again, Councilor Nader brought up the point. We certainly are going to conduct the election for town council person.
Oh, yeah, town council person, but I just would rather hold this whole thing off about the town manager to another election. Or we have a general election for,
Yeah, if we hold it off for another election, that means that we'd be into a 2-year cycle, so we would, if we put it on a general election, town administrator would be up for election, which would be 2 years. So then the implementation of the town manager would take another 2 years after the term of that, which we saw with Administrator Hamilton, correct? Was it not on the agenda, on the, so that's what happened?
Same ballot, correct.
Yeah, so, I have to say, I'm not averse to bringing in another election in fall, just for this. So then it would negate having to vote for a town administrator. So when the administrator's term was up, then the elected council members could, if the populace accepts this, could vote for a town manager. So does that sound amenable to do something like that?
I would support that.
yeah, I just feel like we need to give this a little bit more time. I just don't want to rush into it and then let the voters think that we really weren't giving them the option.
The third time,
Give
yeah.
them like 6 months to know, and we have plenty of time to have it in the paper and have it at different meetings that would, instead of just having one workshop, try and rush through it, and it's something we have to live with, whether, if it passes, and that's with, we're
Right.
living with it.
And the upside is we would have a full contingency of council members to review it, to make suggestions to it. So are you going to make a motion that we, what do you want to do?
I want to make a motion to table, but do you want to table it and have a further discussion at another time, or will you have a fifth counselor, and then we can decide when we want to go forward with it, or?
I support what you want to do, but I think it would only be fair that Councilor Boucher is here as well. At least 4 of us would have a say whether it gets tabled or moved, and we could vote to put into a November election. It's not that far off, November, so. And at that point, we certainly would have a new council member, we'd have 5 of us, we could look at it, and whatever the timing is to get it into a November election.
You saying the special election in November?
Yeah,
This November?
if the timing is correct,
Yeah,
yes.
That'd be great.
I think it would give everybody time to study all the pros and cons of it.
I just think if you wait until the next general
Can't
election.
do it, because then we'll be in the same
About 4
situation.
years, we can't
Right.
change.
We would witness what happened the last time. And if it truly is the voice of the voters, then they'll decide whether they want to be the town manager or retain the town administrative position. Mr. Radko?
Would you consider during the discussion minor charter changes? Hold off on the town manager, but if there's other little changes you want to put in that are not controversial, would you want to bring them in now or wait until you talk about the difficult one?
I think that all changes to the charter should be done at one time. Otherwise, it looks like we're cherry picking which one. They may seem like they're not too intrusive or running the town, but it's probably best that they're all handled at the same time.
Mr. President? if I may?
Yes.
So you're proposing an additional election in November, not in lieu of?
I have not promoted that.
July?
We're considering that right now.
Oh,
With
that's in
Councilor
July.
Ralph said that she might share her opinion that it should not be voted on in July. But what I suggest is that we certainly review it when we have 5 council members, and if we want, this is my opinion, hopefully it'll be 5 at that time, then we could go forward and possibly put on for a special election. It's what, $7,000? I think it's money well spent.
I think that, if I may, I believe the charter does allow you to make an appointment after a year has passed. So you may not have to have an election for the replacement of the town council.
I prefer to have an election. That's just my feeling.
But I'm saying the charter does give you
Yeah,
that.
I know. I'd rather let the residents
Mhm.
decide who's going to represent them. I'm not a,
So the average is about $10,000 per,
Okay.
just to let you know,
Alright.
9, 10.
I was told it was 7, but okay, I'll defer to you.
But now that's the time that we know, we can put it in the budget, so.
Yeah, right, so it's one, right, yeah.
Spoken like a true numbers person, Councilor Ralph. Good. So you want to make a motion to continue to Councilman Boucher's back?
Yes.
Okay. Is that
anything that we don't approve tonight doesn't make it onto the ballot. So if we wait and defer, we are essentially saying we're not putting this on the ballot. Unless we
That's
hold
why
a
it's what-
special meeting later this week.
Well, then so be it.
Look, I'm just
No,
stating that for the record.
But the ballot will contain the election, we will have an election for a council person, correct? Who's watching the time constraints, the timeline on this?
We are, I mean, you,
That's already been set.
yeah, that's
Correct.
done.
All right,
So you're
that's
not
my
changing
concern.
it.
It was my concern to have a councilman appointed for the budget, but I didn't get any traction on that one. So, okay,
So can we table this till the end of July? Because if we're gonna miss the election anyway, then we'll have a fifth counselor and we can have a full,
and then we'll have plenty of time to put on, we're gonna have a special election, well, nobody wants to do it in December, but
no, but even if we stick to November, when do we have to have it?
75 days? Is it 75 days?
I forgot, on a charter amendment, it's pretty close to that.
Okay,
I thought it could be a little less, like it's 65, but it's gonna take you 75, I think, just because of advertisement and catching the loop.
So we have to the end of August.
oh, plenty, yeah, plenty of time, at
Early-
least 90
early
days.
September.
All right, so is that a motion, Councilman?
Make a motion to table to, do you have the last date? For the register,
20th.
20th to July 20th, for a public hearing workshop, proposed charter amendments to the town manager.
The town, excuse me, themselves, town manager, replacement of town council vacancies, consolidation of services, recall provision, and anything else that may come up.
Yes. Yeah. I think, but
Should we
that's
say
all.
any proposed charter amendments?
I think that would be good to
Any
cover,
proposed charter amendments?
and I'll second that motion.
Madam Clerk, we've had a motion by Councilor Rounds, a second by Councilor Nato. Would you call a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Alves?
Yes.
Mrs. Nader?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynch?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 5, old business, ordinance amendment, RE section 15-6, one-way streets - Maury Road. Discussion by council, vote, or other action. Councilors? Discussion?
Councilor Zelinski?
Yes.
The only issue I have with this is the timeline of making Maury once again a two-way street, and that the safety issues have yet to be addressed. It was made a one-way because of safety issues, because of the narrowness of the road, the sharp turn into it, and I would like at least a plan in place to address the safety issues before we actually take the signs down. Or I would like the council to consider that.
Councilor Rounds, any thoughts?
I mean, what is the timeline? How is this gonna happen? We're just taking down the signs and it's just gonna happen one day? I mean, what is,
This is the first reading, I think, of what, to change it back to a two-way. Then there'd be a second reading. and
so
then-
are we gonna have like that sign there saying that it's gonna turn back or some sort of warning or?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
You know, the neon, the electric sign that we have with the police department, we could, if it's not being used, we could have them bring it up there and say that it'll be next week.
We'll return to a two-way road?
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think, I don't know, people, to be honest with you, I don't think they're honoring it right now.
I'm just sitting in front of the police station.
Yeah, but that can be
People are
confusing.
going two ways
Oh, two
on
ways
this
now.
street right now.
Right, so,
Well, if, we had residents here at our last meeting offering to essentially donate some of their land to widen that road.
right,
I would just like to see a plan in place so we know that the safety concerns are being addressed.
Yeah, the last election, so at the last meeting, Administrator Hamilton, if you recall, we spoke that our town planner, our director of our highway department, that you would meet with Mr. Wood and our counterparts on highway as well as planning to come up with a plan. Councilor Nato's right, the folks that were in the audience did say that they would turn over.
Do we know who they are?
We were taking, Madam Clerk took the names that night.
The only thing that I've had an opportunity to do is meet with Mr. Wood, and he was very appreciative that things would go back to the two-way because of the golf course and the residents and the trash collection and things that, may not have been thought out in terms of just a 400-foot section of the street being owned by North Smithfield and immediately going into Burritt. So, but if that's something, I don't recall there being many other requests. In fact, in my term, no other requests other than this one time to change it. So I don't know if we need to have a traffic study done or something that will give us a little impetus to move forward with, a major purchase of someone's land, even if they say they're going to donate it, we still have to make sure that we pave it. And
Absolutely.
so,
Proper drainage and whatnot, construct the road to safe.
right.
So that's why, when I left her, I felt confident with Mr. Pendergast and we were in agreement
Yeah.
and we were gonna reach out to Burrville. Now, the folks from Burrville, it's one thing that someone will say, sure, I'll give you a couple of feet of my property. They have to. I mean, they have to say, yeah, it is. I mean, they don't have to, we're not forcing them to. We choose my words differently. They have to step forward and voluntarily give that property to us as well as the Burrville side too. I'm not one to talk about eminent domain. If they don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. But guess what? I'll vote to turn it into a one-way again. So let's just try to get this all nice, because they want it to be safe as well. And I think that their hearts are in the right place. Their name's been recorded, they're on the video camera, so, but that's, again, it's not to say that they would do it. They don't have to do it, but if they would. And you had a conversation with Mr. Richard?
I've had a conversation with Mr. Richard, and he sent me a very old plat map where that road actually had an island between. So there was a one-way entrance in and a one-way entrance out. It was, the lane itself was split with grass island, and I have it on my phone. Not that that's helpful to anybody, but I could send this to Mr. Erickson if this is something that maybe we could put back. And that sounds like it would address pretty much all of the safety concerns.
Sure, well, I mean, I'd rather get a price before we decide to
Right.
do these things and give you an idea of what the cost would be, and then you can let me know if you want to move ahead, so.
Speaking of price.
The price is right?
Yeah, well, our friends in Burrville willing to split the cost with us, probably. Affects more of their residents than ours.
Well, I don't think they had an overwhelming show of support against it by their residents, so
Yeah.
that's really what they're listening to.
I
That the
think-
residents did not want it to be a one-way street, so that's 300 some odd signatures.
So this is the first reading, correct?
Correct.
So, Council, do you mind if I just accept this as the first reading, we move on and schedule for a second reading at some other meeting? To be determined when. Joanne, do you have a calendar, how we're looking for agenda items?
I do not.
Okay,
What do you want? What month?
sooner the better. I want to take these folks out of limbo.
I think
Because, what's the first meeting in June?
first meeting here is June 1.
Because basically all we have to do is have it as a second reading, take the action, vote, turn it back into a two-way street. I don't think it's gonna take a lot. In the interim, you'll be working with Mr. Wood, so.
June 1 or June 15.
June 1, I think it's just a matter of addressing it, taking it as a second reading, and taking a vote to turn it into a two-way street. I don't think it'll take much time. Councilors, you okay with that suggestion? Okay, I make that as a motion, we continue it to June 1st.
Second.
All right,
Ms. Alves?
Yes.
Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Devoto?
yes. Yes, yeah, Mr. Allen.
Yes, I live over there. I'd just like to, could I see the photo that you have?
That's why I looked at you, Dan, when they talked about the island. I said, you've been there for a while.
40 years. Maybe that's when they had Boston or something.
He says this is the oldest map that he could find on file.
Yeah, but the oldest map has my division as being a farm.
Maybe when they were using the Western Hotel as a, down there as a hotel. Maybe that's what, maybe 1850. I lived there since 71.
You lived there since 1871, didn't you?
No, that's my house was built. 1971, and there was never a problem with that road. So, my neighbor. And I will say this to you, those signs don't mean a thing now.
That's correct. Yep.
Yes, the house across the street.
Okay.
Yeah. In the big red house.
Thank you, Mr.
Those
Allen.
signs don't mean anything.
So the motion we voted, yes, it's gonna be June 1st, right?
Yes.
Okay. Under new business, B, discussion by council, vote or other action on agreement for supplemental service on the sewer assessment ordinance, Horsley written group. One, authorization for signature.
That is, at the request of the sewer commission, they voted to recommend to have Mr. Shatneff, Russell Shatneff, who's been working with them on the sewer ordinance. Sort of a retainer, everything should be written in there, it's just a regular, you know, they would ask you to provide them with a not to exceed number, and then approve that so that it can continue. He's done the majority of his original work, and he has more work to do. Not much though.
So in front of us, Madam Administrator, I have a copy of the supplemental agreement we may be agreeing to. Mr. Iglesias, still here, or where? Okay, that's a legal question. Councils, is there anything you wish to
I
discuss?
believe it was Billy Glios that did look at it as well, I think.
Mr. Iglesias,
I'm sorry.
I'm playing attorney again.
Sure, no
Tomorrow
worries.
night I'll be playing doctor, you know. In front of us, we have the Horsley Witten Group.
Yes.
Supplemental services. I started looking at it over the weekend again, and it seems every time I look at it, something else pops out at me. I understand this, I don't want to use the term boilerplate, but it's a boilerplate contract, yeah?
It is.
So I started looking at how we could tighten it up, because I've been through this before with the town, with a architectural firm in Connecticut, and if we were going to go to court, we would have had the train to go to Connecticut. So when we read this, I understand Horsley Witten is out in Sandwich, Mass. Is there any way we can tighten this up, like some of the verbiage they use again? On page 3, under 11. Are you there?
I'm following.
Okay, 3 lines up, 4 lines up. This section may be specifically enforced by any court of competent jurisdiction by HW Witten Group, which, so, they want it in the jurisdiction somewhere in Massachusetts, and if you go down to number 16, where it says, "The laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts shall govern this agreement." I don't know, am I splitting hairs here? Should it not be the state of Rhode Island?
We can ask for that.
Yeah, can you tighten this up?
Yeah. Are those the only concerns you have?
Well,
We
no.
did produce the certificate of liability insurance.
Yep, I saw that, I'm
As an
with the
additional
$3 million,
insurance.
yeah, I'm all set with that.
That was actually the town administrator that got that from me. So I'll correspond with regard to items number 11, 16.
16, right? 11 and 16?
11 and 16.
Well, and if you'd be so kind, solicitor, look through for anything else that you could, under your expertise to protect our town, it's not gonna go to litigation, but we said that about another project in town and it did, so if you could.
Would you authorize signature with those amendments?
I would be comfortable with it. Councilors, would you be comfortable with those amendments to authorize Administrator Hamilton to sign this?
Absolutely.
Council, okay. Someone want to make a motion to approve it with the amendments made? Mr. Iglesias will take care of that, and then we'll have the town administrator sign it. And how much did they tell you, how much not to exceed, Madam Administrator? Did they give you a figure?
They said 25,000, and that would be for the rest of the term.
All right, so we'll incorporate that in there too somehow, okay?
He's actually doing some work on the Greenwich Village project as well. I mean, there's a lot that he's doing. He's done a tremendous job. He really helped us out
Okay.
to get that ordinance in shape.
All right, so there was a motion, there was a second. Need a motion?
No.
Someone want to make a motion? I'll make, I mean, if you're not comfortable, I'll make up, yes, maybe it's better somebody else does. I'd like to make a motion to approve the supplemental services for the town of North Smithfield to be provided by Horsley Witten Group. Once the solicitor takes and amends with the cooperation of Horsley Witten, number 11 and number 16, and with the amount not to exceed $25,000. Upon such amendments, grant permission to the town administrator to sign for the town of North Smithfield. That's the motion.
Second.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes. Okay, so now under old business, C, discussion by council, vote or other action regarding the school construction stage 2 application, including 1, that's taken by subsections 1. Review information requested from RGB, Robinson Green Driver, in response to a letter dated April 29th, 2015. Councilors? Anything? Anybody in the public wish to speak? Mr. Clifford? Yeah. Do you want to just come up? Mr. Flaherty? Gentlemen, just step up to the podium and identify yourself, please, for the record.
Good evening, John Flaherty, number 10 Green Street, Slatersville. Vice President Zwolinski and members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for your service to the town. I know that this month has been particularly grueling with a meeting every week, and I know that comes with a lot of homework as well. So I'm here this evening to follow up on a previous offer to the town council to serve in any way that I can assist the council as it undertakes its review of the stage 2 and really the whole bond process. As your investigation unfolds, I'm sure there's going to be many, many things that people are going to disagree about. We know that. What I'd like to start off with this evening is just a quick review of those things that there appears to be widespread agreement about, just so that we're clear on what foundation we're beginning this discussion. And I also would suggest that we collectively not take our eye off of the real goal that we have here with the school improvement bond, the school project bond. In my opinion, there remains a path forward to deliver on this plan in substantial form and achieve 3 critical goals. One is to decommission and raise Hallowell School, which has been a significant money pit for the community. 2 is making provisions to accommodate the displaced students from Hallowell. And 3 is making sorely needed investments in our high school that have been long overdue. And I believe there's a path forward to do this, all within the budget as previously approved by the town council, the school committee, and the voters of North Smithfield. So let's talk about some of the agreement, those things that we can all agree to. And to assist in that, I have one handout that I'd like to present. This is a flow chart that I prepared that outlines the steps that were taken from the beginning of the process. So one thing I think we can all agree on is that the town infrastructure is in a state of serious disrepair. Problems that have been neglected for far too long. I'm talking about our roads, I'm talking about our municipal buildings, look no further than these four walls. I'm talking about many of our school facilities. I think we can also agree that failure to address them any longer will continue to waste and squander what scarce resources are available, and with very little to show for it. I think we can agree that the town council took up this challenge in 2013 by appointing a 17-member task force to examine highest priorities across the town and to present a recommended plan to achieve them all. This wasn't done in silos, it was done with a very big picture for the town. And to present a recommended plan to achieve them. All town boards and commissions had a seat at the table to shape this plan, and partly because of the complexities with the school portion of the project, the school department actually had 3 seats at the table to help shape this plan. Next, it is well documented and it was well understood that the intention of the town council was to present a plan to voters for their approval in the November 2014 election. Nobody disputes that. It has also been well understood that the town would need to address all these deficiencies within a $12 million budget. That was the advice that was provided to the town council by the town's independent fiscal advisor in March of 2013. 2013 and 2014. I got to double check the year, but it was in March. In fact, it was March 17th. So the resulting plan and the cost estimate was arrived at under the guidance of a professional consultant that has expertise in the design and construction of school facilities and that is knowledgeable with all of RIDE's rules and regulations as it pertains to what's required in the way of square footage of classrooms and so on and so forth. This was not just a group of people who got together and said, hey, yeah, let's just do this. This was a professionally prepared plan. That plan was vetted in numerous meetings with the town council, with the school committee, and through multiple public hearings. I think we can all agree on that. We can also all agree that the town council, under my recommendation, did not follow RIDE's sequence of approval regulations. I admit that. That's well known and understood. The town held a referendum after stage 1, preliminary approval, but before stage 2, RIDE approval. I bring this up because I think it's important to recognize that we didn't follow that. I don't think that that was a huge mistake, in fact, on the town's part. And I think that this issue has become a red herring. I've heard a lot of people talk about, we didn't follow the process, we didn't follow the procedures. If we'd only done it, we wouldn't be in this situation. And I'm here to tell you tonight that even if we had done the stage 2 first, we would be in this very same situation that we're in right now. And the way that I would like to show that to you is, if you look at this chart, you'll see that it begins with June of 2013. That was the month that the town council created. Actually, they created it in May of 2013, but the Public Facilities Advisory Task Force got underway in June. If we were going to have a vote in November, which we did, we were required to have the approval of the General Assembly to put a ballot question before the voters. That had to be done by late June when the General Assembly adjourns. And you can't just go in with a bill in early June and say, we need this to get rushed through. So we had to actually approach the General Assembly beginning in May with the language for a ballot question. There would have been no way that we could have had a stage 2 completed at that time. The stage 2 was undertaken in agreement with the town council and the school department with a submission that took place July 21st of 2014. with a completion date. In other words, you submit it July 21st, and you should get an answer by September 9th. That was the original timetable that we were going to follow before the town council on May 19th of 2014 voted to delay doing the stage 2. We did that in part because we thought we should hear what the voters have to say before we spend $31,000 to complete the stage 2. You can argue whether that was the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do. The fact remains there is a process with RIDE to get a waiver from that regulation, to go out of sequence. So if we get the voters' approval, which we did, for a total of 4.3, which was the most that the town could afford, then it's up to the town to work it out with RIDE, to go through the application process, to make whatever minor tweaks RIDE may require. The way that the question was written, the ballot question, gave the discretion to the town council to approve a final plan. So the budget amount was set, 4.3. Town council reserves the right to amend the plan as may be required by RIDE. You get a waiver from RIDE to go out of sequence, and you proceed without having to hold another vote. So when I look at this timetable, I can't possibly see a way that we could have done a stage 2 and completed it before the November vote. Just not possible. So I wanted to point that out. So with this as background, and I'm wrapping it up, but with this as background, I do have a number of documents that I've marked as exhibits A through I to present to you for your review and that substantiate my claims and the actions of the town council throughout the time frame that's being examined. They include a number of email interactions between myself, because I did serve as the chair of the Public Facilities Advisory Task Force and the council, between myself, the superintendent, Mr. DeQuattro. There was a lot of back and forth. And when the town council made the decision in May of 2014 to delay, it was based on a conversation that I had with Mr. DeQuattro. I've got follow-up emails that are in the exhibits that I'm going to give to you, that I alerted him to a newspaper article that appeared in September, where this whole issue of the stage 2 first came out. And I said, I just wanted to give the heads up about it, and he didn't express any concern about it. In fact, if you look at the email, he was still very confident this is more of a clerical issue with RIDE. So we can have that conversation, and I'm happy to come back and answer questions under oath, whatever you need. But I think that this whole issue of the stage 2 is really a distraction. You do have a lot of research to do. You have a lot of discovery to do in terms of, how did we get to the point of having a stage 2 that was, $1.9 million more than what the town approved, that included items that were not part of it. And there needs to be some accountability. I agree with that. But I just want to make sure, and I think Mr. Clifford has a lot more detail on that part of it, but I just want to make sure that at least I leave you with the impression, because I believe it, that there is in fact a path forward. It is going to require some action on the part of the town council. And as best I can tell, the next step that I see, and it's an ambitious one, but it's to either submit a revised stage 2 or a new stage 2, whatever RIDE's going to require, whether you can amend it or whether you have to submit an entirely new one, by late June. By doing it by late June, the town will get an answer back from RIDE by August. That would allow the town council to then begin to work the school portion of this project into the work of the Public Buildings Improvement Commission, so they can begin execution. Because I think, and we had talked all along, that the goal was that Hallowell would not be occupied beginning in September of 2016, I believe. And so that's an aggressive timetable. I'm not going to, but I think that if the town council can work with apparently the school's building commission is the only group that RIDE will interact with. But if perhaps either the town administrator or the town council can prevail upon RIDE to have some dialogue directly with RIDE and the town council or the town administrator, so far they've been pretty quiet. They haven't seemed to want to.
I have done that several times and have yet to receive a response.
But But I think that there's an opportunity here to find out from RIDE. They've reviewed all the enrollment numbers. I'll let Mr. Clifford talk more about that. It may be that we don't even have to build as many as 4. I don't know. That's something for RIDE to come back. I would have thought that our architect would have had a better handle on that, would have been more assured of the enrollment numbers and so forth. But I do think that there's the very good chance that we can make this thing happen. All is not lost. I guess is the point that I'd like to leave you with. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm happy to come back at a later time and be a resource to the council. And I will provide you with the exhibits and the cover letter that you can each keep, and I'll submit
Mr.
one to the
Flaherty.
clerk.
May I ask you a question, John, before you?
Sure.
I want to make sure I understood what you said. Are you saying that the Rhode Island Department of Education would only listen to the school committee building task force?
That's my understanding.
So in essence, anyone else that's involved in this, I just find that incredulous.
Well, I
That's my
believe
one
that the town
recommendation.
administrator can elaborate. I think that she has reached out to RIDE on a couple of occasions, and
And those meetings were canceled. In fact, one of them
Yes.
was when we were en route. So the most recent request was on behalf of myself and the council president, Mr. Boucher, who had requested that I reach out to Mr. De Silva and ask that the time frame before he knew he was going to be out of town, Mr. Boucher did, can you try to get a meeting together, just the 3 of us, Mr. De Silva, myself, and Mr. Boucher. And I had asked in an email, sent an email and followed with a hard copy, and I did get a reply via email on Friday in the afternoon, and we closed at noontime, that it would be impossible to have a meeting that week, meaning that was the end of that week. So that if I was interested in attending a meeting, and Mr. Boucher was interested in attending, there would be a meeting held on May 12th, which is tomorrow, and that clarification of many issues, or I'm paraphrasing, will be handled at that point. Suggested strongly that we try again to schedule something, and
but I also
try
believe that the
again.
meeting that's scheduled for tomorrow, if I understand correctly, the only people who can ask questions of Mr. De Silva are members of the school building task force, not even members of the school committee, as I understand it, can ask questions.
Right, I had heard that. I wasn't told that.
And we've heard that, or do we have this in writing somewhere?
We have it
It's
in our
right.
memo.
Okay,
It's on the agenda.
I'll be attending that. I may have questions tomorrow. I want to see how Mr. De Silva handles that.
I don't think you'll be able to ask them, actually, but...
Well, you know what, then maybe there's always recourse, Mr. Flaherty.
So the only thing I wanted to point out with the emails, and there's maybe 6 exhibits or so that are email-based, is some of them are a couple of pages. Always start from the bottom, because that's where they originate, and then there's a chain back and forth. And I think it may shed some light on some of the issues that have been raised.
Mr. Flaherty, I'd like to publicly thank you for doing all this work. Thank you.
Welcome.
I would like to thank you for keeping so much paperwork.
John, are you attending the meeting tomorrow?
I was planning to not attend the meeting tomorrow, because if it's not an opportunity to ask questions, and it seemed to me that it's going to be a very choreographed presentation, that I didn't want to go and be frustrated, because there's not much that I'm going to learn about RIDE regulations. I spent a lot of time learning them, and my commitment has been to this council to serve as a resource, and that's where I ended. I'm here to help you all sort through it, just because I have some of the institutional knowledge from having chaired the task force and just the historical. And I've got a lot of the records, the minutes, and they're all available online, but I've reviewed them, and I'm very familiar with them, so if I can help, I'm happy to help. I'd like to see the project get done.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. I want to acknowledge Solicitor DeLeo's.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to, you picked up on a point, I just wanted to clarify for you. The comments by former President Flaherty with regard to Mr. De Silva's reluctance to come to other meetings with other town agencies, the council or the school committee, I'm not so sure it's about reluctance. In his position, I spoke to Mr. De Silva specifically on that point, because Councilman President Boucher was going to be away and was asking him to come to a council meeting. And he really referred me to RIDE Regulation 1.08-1, which is the regulation that requires that there be that school building committee. This is the committee that RIDE assumes has the approval and authority of the school committee and the council. If it doesn't have that authority, that's an internal problem for our government. If they're acting without informing, consulting, or our approval, that's our problem. If they're acting without consulting, informing, or approval of the school committee, that's our problem. I mean, those are my words, not his, but he's not going to differentiate, kind of settle the internal governmental problem. And I just told that because I think we lose sight of the fact that this committee is technically speaking for the town as it relates to RIDE. And you caught the gist of that in Mr. DeQuatro's letter, that he felt that he met with that committee and he was acting by virtue of that committee. And so I just want the council to know that if you really, there seems to be some communication, approval and consultation problem, but it's an in-house problem. What I mean by that is, this committee is your committee, right, and the school committee's committee, and it's up to the council and the school committee to have them speak for you. And it's kind of getting flipped, and it's what I'm feeling.
I would agree with
didn't
that.
mean to put my,
No, I would
say
agree with
that.
that.
It's flipped.
Well, that speaks, I think
This is
that's,
supposed to be your extension, I guess, your delegate, this is supposed to be a delegation of your authority and the school committee's authority.
Correct.
and I would,
Delegation of those that are elected to represent this town.
Exactly.
They are just to opine and to give this information to the elected officials so that they can make the final decision. I think that's how our government works.
I was just trying to
No,
clarify.
I know, thank you, Mr.
I appreciate that, that explanation, because I agree, and as much as we may have said that RIDE doesn't seem to want to, that they are doing their thing by their book, but I do think that raises another issue for the council. We talked about, taking charge on getting a stage 2 in. That's one thing that I think the council has drive. The other thing is some housekeeping on that commission. So, and Mr. Clifford's going to address that as well.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Mr. Clifford.
Mike Clifford, 489 Black Plain Road, North Smithfield. I'd like to address Mr. DeQuatro's responses to the town council's letter. I received a copy of it along with the 25 or 26 other people. And I guess I'll start, instead of addressing his letter, I'd like to start by addressing the issue that Councilor Igliozzi just brought up. I sent an email today to Mr. De Silva at RIDE questioning whether the composition of the current School Building Capital Improvement Facilities Advisory Committee, which is what it's legally called, actually meets the regulations of RIDE as far as the composition of the committee. I'll read you a section of what's required. The School Building Committee must at a minimum consist of 8 people, including the superintendent of schools, at least one member of the school committee, the local official responsible for building maintenance, and this is the key part, a representative of the office or body authorized by law to construct school buildings in the municipality. I interpret that to mean the town council, because in the past we always had a town council representative or member serving on these committees. The next goes on to say, the school principal from the subject school, a member who has knowledge of the educational mission and function of the facility, a local budget official or a member of the local finance committee, and at least one member of the community with architectural engineering and/or construction experience, to provide input relative to the effect of the project on the community and to examine building design and construction plans. I don't see a member of the town council or a representative of the town council sitting on the stage 2 facilities committee. Tommy McGee is on there as a member, and it says town council member. Mr. McGee isn't a town council member and hasn't been since this stage 2 committee was formed. I saw Mr. McGee today, and I don't believe he's been going to the meetings. So you don't have a legal representative on that committee. And the way that that statute reads, it seems to suggest, since school departments can't own buildings, and the town council is responsible for floating the bonds and approving the bond questions and building the schools, and always has been in charge of the oversight of the construction of the schools, that when they say a representative of the office or body authorized by law to construct school buildings in the municipality, I think they mean a representative of the town council or a member of the town council. And I sent Mr. DeSilva a letter today asking that question. And do we have that? The second one was a local budget official or member of the local finance committee. I asked him to explain that as well, because they have on there the business manager for the school department. And since they earlier referred to the body that was authorized by law to construct the school buildings in the municipality, I'm questioning whether is the school department's business manager a local budget official with the intent of what they wanted when they set this regulation? Because it goes on to say, or a member of the local finance committee. So do they have to have, for example, Mr. Pomeroy or a member of the budget committee on that committee? The third thing was, there's a member of the community with architectural, engineering, and/or construction experience. I'm not quite sure who fulfills that, and I did remember seeing on one of those documents that's online on the Dropbox, there was a question posed to Mr. DeSilva, questioning whether Mr. DeQuattro could serve in that capacity, since he's the engineer that has been hired to the architectural firm to oversee the project. Because that individual's responsibility, whoever is selected to serve in that capacity, is to provide input relative to the effect of the project on the community and to examine building design and construction plans for reasonableness. I don't see where there's a safety, a checks and balance system there. If Mr. DeQuattro is placed on this committee as the community resident with architectural expertise, he's basically going to be passing judgment on his own renderings and construction plans for reasonableness, and I see a conflict with that.
I was going to say, Mr. Cliff, it seems more like a conflict of interest.
So I'm waiting for a response from Mr. DeSilva on that. I also asked Mr. DeSilva if RIDE condoned having people on these facility committees, members of the communities, who have or may bid on projects of construction with the school department and have been possibly awarded contracts in the past. I think that might be the case, and I'd like to get the answer to that question. Do we have people on the committee who have had business dealings in the construction trades with the school department, and is it appropriate to have people on that committee who often bid for school projects and are awarded contracts? This committee doesn't just oversee the construction of the school, it's all of the capital projects of the school department. So I asked for an opinion, a response, of whether I'm correct or incorrect, from Mr. DeSilva, and when I get the response back, I'll be happy to forward it to everybody. So those are my concerns about the composition of the committee to begin with. When I read Mr. DeQuattro's letter, I noted that right away on page 1 in paragraph 1, he acknowledged that RGB's contractual relationship is between RGB and the town council. I was glad to see him say that in writing, because when I read the article in the Valley Breeze, it sounded to me like he thought he had 3 bosses. And I was always raised to believe the one that pays you is the real boss. And that's the one you take the marching orders from. So I'm thrilled to be seeing that. The second issue that was brought up was the question of when you were informed of the changes. And I'd like to bring your attention to the, hold on 1 minute. He seemed to indicate in his letter that he had the January 31st meeting with the Facilities Committee, and it was a public meeting, and an agenda was published, and it seemed to suggest that you had an obligation to read that agenda, and if you wanted to go and keep informed on what was happening with the Stage 2 application, that was your opportunity. I think that's a far stretch from what needed to happen. And when you look at the agenda for that meeting, there's not one action item on here. There's introduction of Rhode Island Department of Education representative. There's discussion and review by Joe DeSilva of RIDE, Stage 1 preliminary approval, Stage 2 necessity. There's not an action item. There's nothing on this agenda that says discussion, vote, or other action will be taken. I saw this agenda. I didn't go to that meeting. If this agenda had been posted and stated consideration of adding 1.6 million or 1.9 million or 2.0 million, you can bet your life I would have been at that meeting screaming like a banshee. But I didn't know that they were going to add money to that, to the Stage 2 proposal. And I question how they could have added to it since there was no action item on the agenda. Shouldn't they have had a subsequent meeting and voted on it and placed an item on the agenda appropriately? So in your packet that I gave you, the first one is the agenda. You tell me if you think that's it. And on the second page, on item number 2, there's supposed to be, in the Stage 2 application, a letter of support from the community. I looked on another Stage 2 application of another school district who had a major construction project, and on that, in that Stage 2 application for school committee approval and public support, there was an actual letter from the, I believe it was from the superintendent of schools, attesting to the fact that at last night's school committee meeting, the school committee voted to approve the Stage 2 application as drafted, and it will be submitted tomorrow. That, I think, is what RIDE wants to see as documentation of support. I don't think they want to see a statement in the letter that says, our school committee and town council support these projects and are well-versed on their details. Was anybody here well-versed on the details of what went into RIDE in the Stage 2 submission? Because I've heard the school committee members say they hadn't had a clue what was changed. I think there was an obligation to bring that Stage 2 application back to some board, whether it was the school committee or the town council, show them what was in the application before the application was actually submitted. So I think that's an issue, and I think I was upset that Mr. DeQuattro seemed to suggest that everybody else was at fault because they didn't respond to the posting of the agenda and go to the meeting and stay informed. I read the agendas. I try to stay informed. There was nothing that made me want to go to that meeting because it looked like it was just a sit down and talk about Stage 2 type meeting. Had he posted that agenda and said, consideration of adding $1.6 million in projects, I would have been there. And I would hope most of you would have been there too. So I think it's totally dismissive of him to kind of fluff that off as, well, I did my part, I posted an agenda. Okay, so moving on. He talks about the changes were required because of the change in the demographics. He also states that he received them from the school department, the latest data. Okay? I showed you last week, the last time I was here, the changes in the Stage 1 and Stage 2, I'm sorry, in last year's NESDIC projections and this year's NESDIC projections. That argument that the demographics changed and that's why they had to add things to the project doesn't hold water. The NESDIC projections, the most recent ones, again, I showed you the charts last week. Those were pulled directly from the NESDIC projections. In grades 5 through 12, the enrollment increases over the next 10-year period by 31 students. In grade pre-K through 4, it decreases by 1 student. But page 3 in your booklet here, I've shown you the chart year by year, the old projection, meaning the one that was done in February of 2014, and the most current. And you can see that every single year in the 10-year projection, the numbers are lower in the new projections versus the old. So why do they keep saying all of a sudden the demographics surprised them? And that's why they had to redo it. Okay? If you look at the documents, page 4 is 2 sheets stapled together. The first page is from the stage 1 application, and it's calculating the number of rooms needed each year based on the NESDIC projection they were working off of. The second one is the same chart for the most current stage 2 application, and it shows the new NESDIC projections and how many rooms. If you go through this item by item, for pre-K through 4, let's take a school year 15-16. On the first stage 1, they need 30 classrooms. 15-16, on the newer one, they need 30 classrooms. Let's go to 16-17. Stage 1, they said they needed 31 classrooms last year on the stage 1 application. The new numbers, 16-17, now they only need 30 classrooms. The need for classrooms didn't go up, it went down. It's lower enrollment. If there's neither of these scenarios is any big deal. I think you'll see the number 31 more frequently on the last year's breakdown of classrooms. If you look on that stage 1 page and go across 31, 31, 31, 31, and you'll see that number less on this year's calculations. So my question is, what are they talking about? The demographics have changed and caused the need for new rooms. I don't think that's true. I think what happened is we're using the rooms this year in the plans differently than they were planning on using the rooms last year. We're building 6, not 4 classrooms, because some of the existing classrooms, we're doing things that are not needed. I'm going to say are not needed. One of the regular ed classrooms in the stage 2 plan is converting a regular ed classroom that could be used to house a 2nd grade, a 3rd grade, whatever you want, into a 2nd computer room. We already have 1 computer room in the building. Now we're going to add a 2nd one. I don't understand the logic in that. All of the technology now is Wi-Fi. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in the capital budget every year to buy the Google Chromebooks. You don't need to take the kids into a computer lab. You bring the computers and the Chromebooks to the students on the cards. We bought the cards. So I don't understand why we're choosing to use a real classroom that could be used for housing students in a regular setting for a 2nd computer room. The school that I was telling you about, that I looked on their website to see what their stage 2 application looked like, was an 800-plus elementary school. I think it was pre-K through 4, just like this one. They have 1 computer room of 1,000 square feet. It's a brand new building. They designed it with 1. Why are we adding a 2nd computer room? To take up what was an existing classroom. Okay? There's also in this building design, it looks and appears to us, and Mr. Radko looked at the maps as well, and the maps are very hard to follow, to be quite honest with you, because they seem to change from year to year. I don't know how the configuration of the building changes that much, but it seems to. That we also have a health room. There was no health room in the design for the 842 student building. I want to explain to you what the health instruction is. Mr. Zielinski is the 2nd grade teacher. I'll be the phys ed health teacher. If I don't want to do phys ed, or I don't need to do phys ed today, but I want to do a unit in health, I go down to Mr. Zielinski's room, get those 25 kids, and now I'm going to walk them down to another room that we designated and built an extra room for to teach them health. Who's left in Mr. Zielinski's room when I take the 25 kids who he had in front of him out?
Just me.
Just him. So the solution in most school districts is, he leaves the room, and the health teacher goes in there and uses that room to teach the health.
Makes sense.
What a waste of money. If you have extra space available because your enrollment has declined, great to have a health room. But seriously, we're going to build a new room so that we have a designated health room? How did the elementary school in the other community get by? And every school system I've worked in, quite honestly, the only times we ended up with a designated health room was when the enrollment went down, we had extra rooms, and somebody said, hey, let's use it as a health room. And they used it as a health room. But most time, the itinerant health and phys ed teacher, if they're doing health, they go to your room and you leave and go to the teacher's workroom. We have 2 of them in this building. And you use the room, okay? So that's a question. The other change here is we use the full-size classroom, it appears, for an opportunity room. There is no opportunity room in the other school district that just built a new building. The opportunity room is an area where if a child, of course, this is a unique term that I just heard last year in this district, but the opportunity room is a full-size classroom where if a child, and we're talking pre-K through 3 and 4, okay, is upset and needs to be removed from the classroom, it's an area where they can go and stay until they've calmed themselves down and are ready to return to the class. It's a full-size classroom. Who's got that luxury of using a full-size classroom for an opportunity room? Now, on the chart, it says, anticipate combining with OTPT services. It's a 900 square foot area. OTPT, in the other school that was just built, the brand new one that RIDE approved, the OTPT person uses a 300 square foot office. Occupational therapist, go to Mr. Lugliosi, the new second grader who has need of occupational therapist services, and I take him out as the occupational therapist and show him how to walk through the lunch line, or show him how to take the elevator, or show him things and how to do things, life skill things in the building, things like that. They work with kids one-on-one, okay? The physical therapist does the same thing. Those people usually take the students to the gym and use the adaptive phys ed equipment. So why do you need a full-size classroom for the OTPT to share with the opportunity room? And I don't know if I would want to be an OTPT person in the opportunity room when I have a student who's out of control in that room. I mean, it just makes no sense. And I think the real reason is we want the opportunity room. Because there's plenty of other spaces in the building where it appeared you could use a 300 square foot area for the OTPT person. Again, so if you take out these changes in rooms of existing rooms, we don't need 6 classrooms. I don't understand how they come up with the numbers. I'd like to sit down and talk with them and have them show me. But if you want to dream up a purpose for every existing classroom that we have now, sure you can say you need 6 classrooms. But listen, folks, the reality is we don't have the money to be building 2 additional classrooms at about $288,000 apiece when you have a budget of 4.3. So this thing went over budget, and we needed to have the 6 classrooms, in my opinion, not because the enrollment went up, but because we just decided we're going to use classroom space for things other than classrooms. Okay? So, that's a big issue in my mind.
Before you go on, I have 2 questions. With the NESDEC numbers from February and the NESDEC numbers from December, has classroom size changed at all?
No, I don't believe they did. I think they used the same numbers they used in the past. I don't believe it has anything to do with the NESDEC numbers. I'll be very honest with you. It has to do with they're using rooms differently than what the rooms are intended because they'd rather have more rooms available to them. And that would be wonderful if we had unlimited resources and could afford to build 4 luxurious classrooms, but we just don't. That's not reality.
Do we know if they actually use the opportunity room for the purpose of misbehaving child?
Well, they did last year, I believe, but I don't know.
Well, I asked, Lorraine, my first grader, if she knew what the opportunity room was. She told me no. There is a child in her class who does have issues and.
I wouldn't speak about any particular child.
No,
I really wouldn't go there because you might be encroaching on the child's privacy rights.
Well,
I mean,
I'm just gonna say that no child was ever removed for misbehaving and put into any other
well,
room.
but it's my understanding they have used the room in the past.
Okay,
Okay, but then the other thing to do with the capacity of the building is, if you look at handout number, sorry, oh, I didn't give it to you, I guess. I don't know. Here's my handouts. Okay, so I think it really has to do with how are we using the rooms that we have currently as classrooms, and why are we labeling new rooms that we're building as health rooms? If we seriously look at this and see how many academic classrooms we need, I think the problem can be solved with 4 classrooms. Mr. DiQuattro also stated in his letter, and I don't understand this comment, that the state's true approval has nothing to do with the bond amount for construction. I don't understand what that even means, because Mr. De Silva, in his letter, stated that part of the reason for denying the bond was, at the moment, there is no plan from the district or the town that matches the voter approval. To me, that would mean dollar amount. So why would you submit a plan that exceeded the dollar amount when it appears that RIDE won't approve a plan unless the dollar amount matches what the voters approved? This just doesn't make sense to me. He also says that, after the stage 2 submission, a meeting would be requested with the town council. I don't want a meeting after you did something. I want a meeting before you do something, so I can say, don't waste your time. We don't have the money. I mean, that's, I just don't even understand that at all either. He also says there is no scandal here. I guess that's a matter of opinion, because in my mind, when a form is submitted to any state agency, asking for permission to spend in excess of what voters, town council members, and school committee members understood what would be spent without bringing it to their attention, that to me is a scandal. Maybe not by his standards, but by my standards it certainly is. And he says this is a process typically dealt with by the school committee. Well, they were clueless too, apparently, the majority of them, so, okay, it's not your business, but it's the school committee's business, but they were unaware of it as well. He talks at great length in the article in the letter, about the maximizing funding solutions and the moratorium, and there's no secret agenda, and all this other stuff. But look at page 5 of your handout. Mr. De Silva said, let me find it right now. New construction, this is Mr. De Silva's letter of April 17th. New construction, including an addition, is not eligible for approval during the moratorium. I'm not quite sure that that's even a full sentence. I think he might have omitted part of the law. If you read on page 5 at the beginning from the regulations, it says, in the event that the General Assembly or State Budget Office imposes funding limits, the regions will consider applications for school construction and renovation projects in accordance with the priorities listed below and in the order of priorities listed below. I only put the first priority. That's their highest priority. They had a whole list of reasons why you could still get funding even though there's a moratorium. And the first one was replacement or renovation of a building which is structurally unsound or otherwise in a condition seriously jeopardizing the health and safety of school children. Here's the catcher, where no alternative exists. I think, personally, I don't think RIDE would have ever approved this project because we do have alternatives to the program that was being submitted and requesting funding for. And it clearly says there They will consider those things and provide you with funding if it meets the criteria of health and safety, as long as there's no other alternative to exist. Turn to page 6. Here's the alternative that exists. This was from the NESDEC study done in, I think it was 2009. And this page shows the configuration of NSES as a pre-K through 3, and then North Smithfield Middle School, 4 through 7, and then the high school, they bumped the 8th graders up, and it was 8 through 12. Okay? This was projected in 2009 as a first option and proposal by the NESDEC people. NESDEC people, by the way, are a team of 5 or 6 people with PhDs in education, and they come in and review your situation and make a recommendation. But this proposal wasn't accepted by the superintendent or the school committee or the administrators. However, if you look at the capacity of the building, I wrote in what next year's projected enrollments are supposed to be by grade level. The North Smithfield Elementary School, NESDEC said the capacity of the building was 606 kids. Existing, what was there, not adding on the 4 classrooms. The enrollment next year for those grade levels would be 522. That's under capacity. Move down, North Smithfield Middle School. The capacity in 3 years ago when they did this projection was 550. If you move the 4th graders over, 550. Move the 8th graders to the high school. The capacity of the high school is 690. That'll give you 660. Guess how much this option cost when the NESDEC people proposed it in 2009? Zero. Zero. You move the kids over. So really, if RIDE approved our program and gave funding when we had available space, they squander our money as far as I'm concerned. And I think RIDE, or somebody from the school department, may have become aware or had conversations that, hey, you have a lot of extra space in your other buildings. I don't know if we can do this, because the moratorium only gives us the right to do that if there is no other alternative available. And I think the information that you have to provide in your stage 2 application, you have to provide a statement in there that shows the existing capacity of the schools. And in the stage 2 application, where it shows the existing capacity of the schools, it notes that North Smithfield High School, according to the RIDE calculation, has 763 student capacity, but that has to be modified because of other certain programs. But it's under capacity, that has a surplus capacity of 240 students. RIDE knows this. This had to be submitted with the application for the stage 2. Okay? That's operating at, you're under capacity by 31%. They like to see you under capacity by no more than 18%, I believe. Okay? The middle school is under capacity by 127 students, which is 22%. They had to read this form. They had to, it's required as part of the submission. Again, I'd be astounded, and I'd like to know if they've ever given money for new construction when there was a moratorium on, if a school system gave a sheet that had to show the surplus capacity in 2 other buildings that could accommodate the students and provide an alternative solution. So, I think that may be an issue for RIDE. I don't know, but I'd love to have the ability to ask you a question, but I can't because they won't take questions tomorrow night. I do note, though, I found that interesting, too, that they wouldn't take questions because Mr. De Silva ended his April 17th letter by saying, once the information requested above has been provided, please contact us to set up a meeting with the school building committee and representatives of the town. But now I guess you can go as a representative of the town, you just can't talk or ask a question. We're going to have a dog and pony show, and only certain people are going to be able to ask a question, and they'll all be talking about the process and pointing to him and saying, oh, it's all about the process. But no one will raise any questions about how the classrooms are being used. Nobody will talk about how the other buildings are under capacity. We'll just have a 2-hour meeting of that Mr. Flaherty didn't follow the RIDE process, and that's why this is all messed up. Even though, as he said, that chart clearly proves It wouldn't have worked that way. You could have done the question exactly as he said when they asked him to do it, and you still wouldn't have been able to pull that off for the November election. But we'll focus on that as the red herring, instead of dealing with the issues within the application itself. Hang on one second. This is my favorite thing that I found in this application. The parking, okay? This is my favorite. I like this one the best. It says on the course sheet that we're putting in 35 additional parking spaces in NSES. It's going to cost about $472,500 in that ballpark.
27.
What's the number?
427.
427,000 for 35 parking spots. So I'm reading this, and I'm thinking to myself, boy, those are pretty expensive parking spots. 13,500. I put in a driveway and a parking area for 6 cars, and I don't think I paid 10 grand. So how could these possibly cost that much? So I went to the Stage 2 application, and I read the documents in the Stage 2 application, and the schematic drawings for the Stage 2 application, explaining the parking situation, show 208 new parking spots being put in. There's option 1, where the parking lot of 208 cars will be on the driveway on the left going up the school, or there's option 2 on the other sheet, where 64 parking spots will be in the back of the building, and then they'll add some more in the front of the building. But both of these, if you read the legend, North Smithfield Elementary School parking summary, 40 acres, zoning, and this, I find this interesting, 1 parking space per 250 square feet of building space. That's not our zoning code. We have a zoning code for educational institutions. And I think the formula is, if you give me a minute to find it, the educational institutions, this is from our zoning ordinance. 5 parking spaces per preschool, primary, or middle school classroom, 1 space per 5 high school students, and 1 space per 3 college or adult education students. So for the elementary, let's focus on that, because that's what this is. It's 5 parking spaces per classroom, basically. Okay? So if you apply the formula and figure out how many maximum classrooms we would have of second graders, first graders, pre-K, K, and the other, it's 31. And that comes out to 100, so if we take 31 times 5, it's 155 parking spots. But this diagram shows 208, and it says we already have 111, we're going to build 208, and then we're going to end up with 319 parking spots. But our own zoning ordinances only require 155. So I went to the other school that was built in the other community for 842 students, and I looked at what they had for parking spots. And I believe they had roughly, I think the number was 187. So I said, something's got to be wrong. So that's when I started reading the details in the legend. So why do we keep talking about we're building 35 parking spots? We're not. If we are, why did he include schematic drawings showing 208 parking spots being built at clearly nearly $500,000? Was that ever discussed with the facilities committee that you'd be building 208 parking spots?
Actually, there was never any discussion about parking as part of the plan. It was never brought up by the architect.
I mean, you know, we had like a day and a half to review this once we got his letter, and then plow through this paperwork in this application. But I can't help but, you know, going back to Mr. De Silva's letter, currently the stage two application did not provide enough information about the planned addition, the associated cost of the addition, and a cost comparison of several master plan options. Pursuant to school construction regulations, stage 2 material must include, and then he lists all the stuff. this to me suggests that the stage 2 application was not of the highest quality. I mean, he's saying it's missing all this stuff, and that apparently is part of the reason why it wasn't approved as well. But, and do I think there might be a scandal here, and he says no? Well, when you're telling me that you're building 35 parking spaces at nearly $500,000, and then I look at the diagram and say, see, 200, I don't know if that's being totally transparent. So, I have an issue with a lot of the discrepancies or the oddities of the stage 2 application. And it could go on and on and on. I mean, I wouldn't even touch the science labs, but, we're renovating 6 science labs. I read the NIASC report. It didn't say move the science labs and build totally new ones. I think it said stuff like, repair the broken pipes and connect the gas. It didn't say move the science labs. And I don't know if there was ever discussion on the facilities committee, but when I read this report, it sounds like they're not just going to go in and renovate the science room that is now a science lab. They're going to move things around in the building, which obviously I think would cost a lot of money. So I don't know, maybe the team understood that, maybe they didn't, but we also have another lab that is used for forensic science class, I understand. So there's actually like 7 lab classes. We only have 6 science teachers at the high school, I believe, according to the budget information. So, I could go on and on and on and on and on.
Can I pose a couple of questions?
Sure.
Do you mind? I'm looking at proposal option 1, parking. And
What are you looking at, Paul?
the
What
option
page?
number 1 for parking.
Oh, yeah.
So it has the parking right down there, pretty close to Providence Pike.
Right.
By the entrance.
Right.
I'm trying to visualize, it's been a while since I did. Is that not a detention or a wetlands area there? Where
I
the
thought
proposed
it-
parking?
I thought it was, but I don't know. I don't know.
I'm there almost
I mean, I guess
every
just
day,
because
that's
there's
like
water,
what it is.
I think just because there's water doesn't necessarily mean it's wetlands. I think it has to do with what type of growth is coming out of the
I
water
agree,
and swamp
and also
area.
has to do with the type of soils.
Yeah.
I understand a little bit. The other thing, I'm pretty sure that there's a high-pressure gas line that runs right through where that proposed parking spot is. I don't know if you can construct or build over a high-pressure gas line.
It can because-
Unless things have changed since I was reviewing plans. I really want to see the full set of plans that's been submitted. Does anybody know if they'll be there tomorrow night? Will they have that?
I don't know, you won't be able to ask a question about them anyway.
I'll try.
It's a Dory Tony show, not
I
a
will
me.
try.
The full set of plans are on the Dropbox.
A full set, yeah, but that's going to be electronic. I need the labels and these things are big for me to see.
There is, that was asked for, and we were told they are not in existence.
Okay.
Fence bigger than 11 by 17. Just to be clear.
I want to bring one other thing up.
I'm sorry to interrupt your thought, Mr.
No,
when you said big connections in the science lab for gas,
well, it didn't sound,
totally different, I understand, but there's a high-pressure gas line that runs right through there.
Yeah.
That's extremely.
Yeah,
worrisome.
I know it goes under the driveway, Paul.
Parking lot over it?
I know it goes under the driveway.
And it goes up, over near Providence Pike, so it'd be
Yeah.
all,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, you can see it kind of.
The science classes have nothing to do with that, it's the.
I understand that, Mr. Lowell. I said, when you mentioned gas, I understand that. We're stepping down from probably a 33
I want to,
high-pressure main that's running through there.
There is one.
Which is
and
nothing but a
it's-
palm.
It most certainly is, I
Okay.
can't believe it's there.
I want to bring up one other thing on the enrollment projections. I sent an email to the superintendent back in 2013, because when NESDEC does enrollment projections, part of the formula that they use is based on live birth rates for residents in North Smithfield. How many babies were born in North Smithfield to more North Smithfield parents, to mothers in the year? And they project that if you have 100 live births in this year, 5 years later, you're going to have X number of kids going into kindergarten. And there was the numbers in the NESDEC projection did not match what was on the Department of Health's website for live births
So it's basically,
for the year 2009.
are you on 3, Mr. Clerk?
No, I don't have that one in there. This is just.
I have around an office supply.
Oh, I do, I'm sorry, you're right, Paul, it is 3, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're looking at 3, yeah, at the bottom of 3, I put the birth certificate, so, the birth rates. So if you look at 2009, the Office of Vital Statistics for the Department of Health, which tracks the birth rates for the state, says we had 96, and NESDIC says we have 105. That's 9 different. If you look at the numbers going down for each year, they're very different. And there's a net, actually, the state office, health department, has 19 less births than the NESDIC number that was used. So if you use lower birth rates, your projections should be a little lower too, to go hand in hand with that. Now, in 2014, the Department of Health says it was 74 and NESDIC has 89, but NESDIC used an estimated live birth because when they did the report, it wasn't the end of 2014 yet, so they didn't have real numbers, so they used an estimated. But if you made that correction, that has a ripple effect for like 5 years down the road, because as those kids can enter kindergarten, then you're overstating first grade, then when they move to second and third and such. So this, I don't see the big increase that they're seeing. I may be reading this totally wrong. I don't think I am, and I wish we could have a discussion with Ryan, because I'd like to ask him if he was aware that there was an alternative solution that would solve the problem, and did that factor into his decision to, well, he denied the application on 8 other things, but I'm wondering if the state was, if we had submitted a plan that was totally within the 4.3 and asked for 4 classrooms, I still wonder in the back of my mind, would the state have approved it when we had the excess space in the other buildings? But we threw everything else in there to kind of make sure that this thing got, in my mind, it looks like we, were we trying to make sure this thing didn't get passed? I don't know. Did we, anyway, so I think all is not as quite as simple as Mr. Quattro kind of suggested in his letter, and there are some issues here that need to be addressed. And I hope you continue with an investigation. I hope you don't just simply accept information. I would like to have the opportunity to ask Ryan the questions. I'd also like to suggest that you authorize the town manager to put some of the town administrator, to put some of these documents on the town website so people can become informed, because a lot of people that I've spoke to are just saying, because Mr. Flaherty messed up the stage 2 application, which is the furthest thing from the truth. So let's start getting real numbers out there. Let's let people know how they're really using the rooms and what their intentions are, and let's let people know what the real enrollment numbers are. And, I am disappointed in RGB for, using a strange calculation for the parking lot. I would think they would know what our zoning ordinance was for educational institutions. It's right online. They've made some, I don't know if they're maybe call mistakes or what, but I'm questioning their information. And I think maybe it's time that we have a new firm in this town, and that we don't use the engineering firm that everybody always does business with. Maybe it's become an unhealthy environment at this point. Maybe we need a fresh set of eyes looking at all of these numbers and coming in with a clean slate and no prejudices for or against. And when you know the superintendent supports something, you might be inclined to want to push things in that direction. I'm not saying that happened here. I'm just saying after a while you get to know what your client wants, and then you just start giving what the client wants. And it might not even be, these errors may not have been RGB's errors. It may be that they were not given correct information by other people in the town employed. And maybe that's why they used some of the numbers they did. But there's certainly an awful lot of red flags and question marks in my mind. Any questions?
Could I just add one really brief thing? I just wanted to point out that I also reviewed all the documents that were, because I was on the recipient list as well. And I looked back at the letter that was sent by Council President Boucher to RGB.
Correct.
And there was a reference to all correspondence related to the stage 1 approval. And I think that was just that may have been an oversight. It should have been stage 2, because there was no documentation about stage 2. So I just wanted to bring that up in case it may be that you want to re-ask for that. Yes. Because the letter did say, it came from the council, this was a preliminary information request. And I think that maybe an addendum should include all correspondence between RGB and the school department and RIDE relative to stage 2.
I'd like to make a motion that we ask the solicitor to follow through with that, to find correspondence with RIDE. Mr. Flaherty, you want to enumerate those again?
Just all correspondence between RGB, the school department, and RIDE concerning
Committee as
stage
well.
2
Should
approval.
we include the school committee?
I don't think you can because they're elected. I believe that elected officials' emails are not.
But the school, I forgot what they're legally called, but the school buildings task force, they're not elected.
Correct.
So we could get communication between
If there is any.
and RIDE, if there is any.
One of the things that I did take note of, and it may be useful to your information, is that the school building task force doesn't appear, I didn't say the correct name, what is the correct title?
I have to look it up every time.
Yeah,
But the one that we're talking about,
that,
I don't believe it's organized with a chair or a vice chair. My reading of it is that that those meetings are facilitated by the facilities manager for the school department, and that they are assembled to provide feedback and guidance, but I don't believe that they're organized as a committee that would necessarily take minutes or that takes votes. I'm not even sure if they take votes.
They do take minutes, and one set of minutes is posted and available, but I don't believe the January 31st minutes are available yet. I think that was their last meeting. I don't even think they had a lot of meetings so far. They might have had one or two. And I have to make a comment. I don't want to insinuate that all the people on the facilities committee shouldn't be there or whatever. I just have reservations about, there are some very good, hard-working people on this committee, but I think there are also some people, because of their business relationships with the school department, if they still exist, I think that's a conflict of interest, personally. I think they're putting themselves in the school department in an awkward position by participating. But again, there are some very good, qualified people serving as well. I just think we ought to follow the regulations, and we'll see what Mr. De Silva says about the accuracy of that. So I'd like to second what John just suggested and plead with you to ask for those documents as well. I'd like to see them, and looking at the documents that were provided quickly, it appeared to me that the stage 1 document, you asked for all correspondence for stage 1. How many pieces of correspondence did he give you? I think I saw.
Just so what you have.
It says like, is it, like how many people, was there like one thing?
I thought it was one.
How could you possibly do the stage 1 application and only communicate once with someone? I mean, if that was what I saw, but I remember when I saw the communications, I thought, how could this be everything? So can we make it clear that you want everything?
Yeah, is there a motion? If someone doesn't make a motion to ask Mr. Iglesias to pursue all correspondence in phase 2 with the committees that were mentioned by Mr. Clifford, as well as Mr. Flaherty, as well as school department, and Robin's committee. If I've missed one, would you please? So there's a motion by me.
Stage 2?
Stage 2.
Stage 2.
There's a motion.
And the other documents from stage 1, because there was, like, how many?
Mr. President, I'm being told by the finance director that stage 2 application, they did respond to it, they put it in the Dropbox, it's in their letter.
No. The correspondence between the 3 people. I didn't see any correspondence. He gave you the stage 2 application.
Correspondence. Okay.
I'm talking about the stage 2 correspondence between the school department, RIDE, and
I just want to kind of move this on. Okay, there's a motion, there was a second, room and vote.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Newry?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillespie?
Yes.
I am.
Yes, I am. Mr. Clifford, thank you. Is there anything else you wish to add?
Nope, thank you.
Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to address? Mr. Lowe?
David Lowe, 80 Highview Avenue, North Smithfield. I find it quite ironic that we're here and discussing this at this time, because I came in front of the town council prior to the vote, made it public that I was going to go around campaigning against this bond for certain reasons. And one of the reasons was when Mr. Flaherty stands up here constantly saying he had his full committee okay, and then he dismantled it prior to the end of everything being settled out, and he dissected it accordingly on. That isn't a true committee, and if you, I said this in that meeting back in, before the vote itself, and I find it ironic we're still here now. And I guess what brought me up here the most was the embarrassment I have to read in the paper for them blaming this on Mr. Lindbergh of last week's, couple of weeks of the Valley Breeze. Now, I actually made up letters and passed them around and put them in people's mailbox to vote no on the bond issue. The reasonings were because they never applied for the stage 2 application. There were a lot of unanswered questions on it, and there were a lot of mistruths being stated about it, and I said this. And today we're here having this discussion, and I have all the respect in the world for Mr. Clifford on all his knowledge, but Mr. Clifford, I believe you should go get a degree, become a superintendent, and run your school, because we pay a superintendent and the town officials, the town administration, school administration team, big money to run the schools. Why do we always have to bicker between the town and the schools? It's beyond me. All the questions you bring up tonight, Mr. Clifford, why wasn't those addressed to the task force prior to this? So I find it ironic that we're here. And I think for Mr. Flaherty and Mr. Clifford to make statements, telling Mr. Lindbergh there's a cancer in this town was uncalled for. And I have a copy of these in case you know.
I didn't receive one in my mailbox, but I'd like
No,
to, just from,
It
thank you.
is illegal to put
Yeah,
it
that's okay, that's not the
on
point.
the stamp.
Thanks.
Yes,
Well,
you are absolutely right, it is illegal, but you know the newspaper things or papers?
Yeah, I knew you meant, because I stuffed them when I wrote.
Okay.
It's legal.
So,
All right. Mr. Lindbergh, Mr. Lowe, I think the reason that we're here,
it's a joke. It wasn't a joke because it was all facts.
hang on, Mr. Clifford, Mr. Lowe, I think the reason that we're here, looking at this, there was a $4.3 million bond to correct some of the inadequacies in the schools. It's gone up to 5.9. I think that is more than a flare in the middle of the ocean. This is it's troubling.
And
And I
again-
think that's why we're looking at it, and I hope you understand that's why we're doing this, because it's blown up by 1 point. This bond is going to, what you wished for, to vote no, may happen because of how it was presented. So we're gonna try to get to the bottom of this and figure this out.
See, there's a process itself, which would have all been, and it states, if for some reason no one keeps listening to it, there's a process where I submitted the plans. It was addressed in earlier meetings that this number could possibly have grown. It was an understanding of that. Now, all this stuff should have been hashed out with the task force, should it or not?
Well, when you said there was a possibility of it growing, I gotta tell you, as a resident that voted for this, I don't want it growing $1 more. It's $4.3 million. And Mr. Lowe, if they're advocating building parking spots, what went to 4 classrooms and now I hear there's 6. And you know those grounds better than anybody. I mean, if you look where those grounds, where those buildings are, that's wetlands.
It is, I believe it is, but again,
They have to put in tile because of mold issues. So there's a lot of problems.
what I try to make very clear is that there are so many different demands that RIDE puts on the school system that I'm not aware of and we're not all aware of. Why don't we go to the appropriate people and find that out before?
Tomorrow night, if we're
Yes.
allowed to ask those questions.
But
Hopefully we'll find out. If RIDE comes in and overrides our bond, then it's all a moot point, because I don't think the residents of the town are gonna support another 1.6 million. That's just my thought. So we're gonna find out.
thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
I want to point one other thing out that I forgot about, that Mr. Lowe made a comment and reminded me. I want you to recall back in 2014, when this proposal was first being suggested, and Mr. DeQuattro said that there was an extremely good likelihood that we would get reimbursed by RIDE because of the health and safety issues. In his mind, it was strictly health and safety, and there would be, reimbursement from RIDE. I was in the audience that night, and I raised my hand and said, excuse me, but why are we all talking about reimbursement from RIDE? Because there's a moratorium on. And he corrected me and said, yes, there's a moratorium on, but there are exceptions, and health and safety is an exception. Which is why I really don't understand Mr. De Silva's letter, because he never mentions the fact that health and safety. So it's either that this isn't really health and safety, they don't think it's health and safety to close Hallowell, maybe the building isn't as bad as everybody seems to think it is, or they saw another alternative. But I believe, Mr. Flaherty, when we came before the facilities committee, they were assured as well that he was totally confident that you'd get reimbursement from RIDE. So
I asked that question directly to Mr. De Silva in the April meeting that I attended with RIDE. And what Mr. De Silva said was direct health and safety issues, which would be Hallowell itself, would be possibly available for reimbursement, but indirect. So adding classrooms to NSES would fall under the moratorium and would not be eligible for reimbursement. Those were his exact statements.
Maybe that's what you understood him to say, but I'm
No,
not sure.
those were his statements.
I would like to
Directly
see,
quoting
I would
him.
like to see all this
Now,
stuff in writing.
in Mr. De Silva's letter that he sent, in the last paragraph, it states that one of the items that were missing was a cost analysis from stage 2 between Hallowell being repaired, which I believe we actually know that number, it's like
$12 million.
over 5 years. What's the short term, 5.6?
Thought it was 3, but.
It's up there, it's a lot. It's basically our budget for everything that we're gonna do. For the short term, and then for everything that needs to be done, it's the full 12 million. That, Mr. De Silva is saying that he never received. So what he would like to see is a cost analysis between the changes proposed at NSES versus what it would take to make Hallowell a wonderful, beautiful school again, which we all know absolutely cannot happen. And when we went to the booths and we made our little mark, it was to get rid of Hallowell.
I think if you look at page 5 again in my handout, and you read the statute of the law, it does say, will consider applications for school construction. And you said you thought Mr. De Silva said only renovations, and that's not what the law says. I really do believe you may have misunderstood what his comment was.
I absolutely did not. I quoted him word for word.
So he told you that you couldn't get money for school construction.
Because he explains direct and indirect.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to figure this one out.
And hopefully, the meeting is supposed to be for him to reiterate what I heard in the meeting that I attended with another PBIC member, Mr. Lindbergh, and RG.
Can I ask a question of the solicitor? If the potential was there for possible litigation, because you did meet in closed session last month, should any council person be making any comments until the investigation is concluded, or should they be?
As far as the executive session is concerned, the rule is very simple. The law says you can have an executive session to exclude the public, but it does not prevent any person from an executive session from making a public comment. Obviously, it's not in the best interest of the town for a school committee member, for any member of any committee, to disclose something in executive session that's going to injure the town's interest. But I haven't heard anything to that effect at this point in time. But the rule is not that, doesn't prevent somebody from in the executive session from actually talking about what they heard. That's just the way the rule is. I don't,
I did read a post on the Valley Breeze today that Roseanne, you wrote, and in it you said, you made a reference to blaming and finger pointing. I don't consider this finger pointing and blaming.
I didn't make that reference. That reference was put
Can I finish
on
my
to
sentence?
what I said.
I think this is holding people accountable. There's a difference between finger pointing and blame and holding people accountable. And I'm not going to be shy about holding people accountable. I think we all have a responsibility to do that, especially when we're paying for services.
And that's fine. My comment was, if you're looking backwards at who to blame, you're not looking forward to actually get the work done. I
You're
don't
also not-
care whose fault it was, I honestly don't, because it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't move us forward. It doesn't fix the problem that we have. It doesn't give us
So you
the
don't believe in
4.3
accountability?
in school construction. I'm not saying that accountability isn't important. I'm saying at this point in time, right now, I don't need to lay blame on anybody. That's not important to me. What's important to me is making our schools safe and a feasible environment for the children, which Hallowell at this point in time is not. That's what I care about right now. I'm not saying that, well, Flaherty said, let's do it out of sequence, and DeQuattro said something else, and that, I want nothing to do with any of that. I just want to look ahead and get what we approved done. That's all I want to do.
Okay, here's what I would like to do. I'd like to make sure that this doesn't happen again.